They thought the old camera by the pantry was just a blind eyeball, one of those gadgets people install during a burst of worry and then forget when life insists on being ordinary again. I hadn't forgotten. I simply stopped mentioning it, the way you learn to stop mentioning the ache in your knuckles or the names of songs no one plays anymore. There are things you carry quietly. That camera was one of mine. We put it in years ago after the break-in down the block. Frank was still alive then. He'd rolled his eyes at the salesman and hissed under his breath about fear being a racket, but ordered the system anyway because I looked at him in that way wives look when they can't explain the dread that lives between the door and the dark. 4 cameras, corners of the living room, a blink of red in the hallway, one in the pantry mouth aimed at the back door where the lock had always been stubborn. It was the pantry camera I kept when the rest turned into paperweights after the company went out of business. I don't know why. Maybe because it watched the part of the house I trusted least. Maybe because the pantry had been the place where we hid Christmas gifts and winter boots, and later, secrets we didn't yet know were secrets. I never told the children, now adults, who trained their complaints to sound like concern that it still worked. The night I checked the feed at midnight, I couldn't sleep. That happens more often now. It isn't worry, not exactly. It's like my body has learned too much of the world and refuses to be entirely unconscious in it. I made tea I didn't need and wandered the rooms that know me better than anyone living does. The living room with its stiff-backed couch, the hallway where Frank's coat still hangs as if he just got home and set it there to warm. The kitchen, where the light above the sink is softer than memories, and where I keep a mug free from the stains of coffee in case someone comes who needs to feel like a guest. I told myself I was only checking the camera because a raccoon had gotten into Kay's trash 2 nights before, and since my back door sticks, I didn't want a raccoon learning how to be a burglar. But when I opened the old app on the tablet, its case cracked on the corner, its battery perpetually pretending to be at 50%. My hands were not thinking about animals. They were thinking about voices. The feed came up in grayish grain, the pantry lit by the wash of the streetlight that sneaks in through the glass on the door. I saw the familiar, the broom with its bristles yawning, the stacked jars of tomatoes I canned back when the garden still believed in miracles, the hook where I hang my shopping bag, and then, as if the house inhaled and exhaled in a single movement, I saw the door. It opened carefully, like a mouth not wanting to make a sound. A silhouette slid in sideways. I recognized the outline before my mind had the decency to be surprised. Carl's wife, Jody, moved the way people move in other people's houses. Efficient, tense. She had a phone clamped between shoulder and cheek, whispering 2 fast words to someone I couldn't hear. The pantry light never came on. She knew the layout well enough to walk in the dark. That stung in a way it shouldn't have. She went to the second shelf, to the tin where I keep the spare keys and the little envelope of emergency cash my grandmother's habit. Not distrustful, just prepared. Her hand rested on the tin, then withdrew. For a moment, I felt a stupid flood of relief. But then, she opened the drawer beneath the messy one, where rubber bands and old birthday candles and blunt pencils live, and she took something small, folded, white. She held it up to the gray light. A paper with my handwriting on it, my name in my own looped script. The envelope with my newest ATM card, still unactivated, the one the bank sent after I told them my old card stuck. She tucked it into her coat, checked the hook where the spare keys should have been empty, because I had, by some quiet stubbornness, moved them. And I watched her mouth, a frustrated word my mother would have smacked out of me if I'd said it. She stood there breathing hard, not from exertion, from the effort of believing herself justified. Then another silhouette filled the doorway, Carl, slower. Not because of caution, but because of the thick kind of laziness a certain kind of man develops around responsibility. He whispered, "Did you find it?" And she whispered back, "Card, not cash. She'll forget she ordered it. I'll activate it online. It's easier this way." There are sentences that become scissors. That one clips something inside me in one clean pinch. She'll forget she ordered it. Easier this way. I didn't gasp. I didn't wail. I didn't even set the tea down. I just put my free hand flat on the counter and kept breathing. People think the breaking point is loud. Sometimes it's smaller than a swallow. They left as carefully as they came, door closing with that soft kiss of wood finding wood, and the pantry became a quiet, rectangular fact again. On the screen, a gray square full of nothing. In the kitchen, me and my cooling tea and the scent of thyme I'd hung to dry days before. I didn't rewind the video. I didn't call anyone. I stood in the middle of the kitchen and thought about pies and permission, and the peculiar way kindness can be used like a crowbar. I looked at the clock. 12:08. Then I pulled a pen from the junk drawer and wrote a list on the back of a grocery receipt. Change, locks, bank, in person. Lena, call, camera, leave it. I slept for 4 hours without dreaming. When the light arrived, it arrived like someone who'd learned to knock. I dressed the way you dress when you've decided to be the adult in the room again. Slacks that remember my shape without clinging. A white blouse that asks for buttons because a day like this deserves ceremony. The coat with a lining that whispers when I move. I don't believe in revenge. I believe in repair. The first repair was to my door. The second to my name. The locksmith was a young woman with a braid down her back and a toolbox that looked like it had been inherited from a grandmother who believed in good metal. Front and back, I said. And if you have a minute, the window latch above the sink is sloppy. She worked without filling the silence. Everyone with a good craft learns the same quiet. When she finished, she handed me the keys, as if they were something holy. 4 copies, she said. 1 for now, 1 for a friend, 1 for a box, 1 for the future. I smiled. Do you always advise with your work? When people look like they've earned it, she said, and then left without pretending to know my story. It felt like kindness that didn't ask to be witnessed. At the bank, the young manager glanced at my appointment slip and then at me, and softened in that way people soften when they see someone their grandmother would like. I told her I wanted to freeze my accounts, new passwords, new cards, no online activation, me in person, or nothing moves. She didn't ask why. She printed papers, read clauses like she meant every word, and slid me a pen that didn't leak or hesitate. Is there anyone else with access? She asked, kind, professional. There was, I said. Not anymore. Would you like to set up alerts? Yes, but not the kind that ring bells in anyone else's house. We smiled, and I left with a folder that felt heavier than paper and lighter than fear. Lena was next. We are not friends. Not exactly. But sometimes the women who save you are ones you wouldn't recognize in a crowd. We met at a bridge night where none of us played bridge. She used to work in probate, knows the difference between a signature and a promise. She made tea without offering me sugar, as if she could see that everything sweet in me had been carefully rationed and I needed to decide for myself. I told her what I'd seen. Not with drama, with the clean cadence truth deserves. I expected her to make a noise of pity or a vow of revenge. She did neither. She opened a clean notepad and said, "We'll move your power of attorney. We'll update your will. We'll create a trust that answers to no one with a key they didn't earn. It will be boring work. Boring is safe." I like boring, I said. It makes a good soup. We made a list longer than mine. She gave me homework like I was a student who would pass because stubbornness is a subject too. As I left, she squeezed my hand. "Don't explain," she said. "Just document." On the way home, I drove the long way. Past the elementary school where Carl had once cried because the teacher wrote his name wrong with a K. Past the park where I taught him to pedal and to fall. Memory is cruel and kind in the same breath. It lets you see the boy who brought you pebbles, the man who pocketed your name. Back in the kitchen, I made soup. Lentils, garlic, carrots. The kind of honest food that doesn't pretend to be a feast. While it simmered, the phone rang. I let it. The machine picked up. Jody's voice spilled out bright concern, threaded with impatience. Mabel, hey, did you get a new bank card? They sent one here by mistake and I was just... Oh, and did you change your locks? Carl couldn't get the back door open when he stopped by to call me. I turned off the machine. People think betrayal looks like strangers with masks. Sometimes it looks like your son, with his shoulders slouched in a way you once thought meant he needed a hug. Sometimes it sounds like your daughter-in-law using your first name like a doorbell. I didn't call back. I wrote another list instead. Safety deposit box for documents. P.O. box. K, next door. Spare key. A slice of cake. I baked banana bread not for them, not even for Kay, though she would get a slice, because women who notice your porch light stays on deserve cake. I baked because making something rise when everything else falls is a kind of prayer. By afternoon, the house was full of that warm smell that makes even the most stubborn memories sit up straighter. I cut a slice, put it on a plate with a napkin that still had the faint pattern of flowers only I cared about, and took it next door. Kay opened the door with her hair in a scarf and paint on her wrist. She didn't ask what was wrong. She accepted the bread like it was a language we both spoke and said, "I'll water your marigolds if you promise to leave the porch light on when you're home." We made a trade of small safeties. That night, before the dark got heavy, I moved the fireproof box from the hall closet to the bottom drawer of my dresser. Not because the closet wasn't safe, but because my hands wanted to feel weight closer. I placed the new documents inside, each page labeled in my hand, as if my handwriting could stand between me and the next storm. Trust, will, medical directives. A sheet of paper with names crossed out and one written in bold. Executor no family. Maybe that looked cruel. It felt like weatherproofing. When the house grew quiet, I made tea again and turned the tablet face up. The camera feed showed only the pantry sleeping. I should have closed it. I didn't. If a part of you is going to break, it should do it before bed. At 11:58, the screen blinked. The back door opened. My breath held itself, but it was small shoulders, not broad ones. My granddaughter Ruby slipped in like a cat that had learned which steps creak and which will let you pass unnoticed. She moved to the shelf with the jars and took one. Not the emergency stash. She unscrewed the lid and placed a folded paper inside. She looked toward the camera, no, toward the idea of being seen, and whispered into the pantry, "I'm sorry, Grandma." Then she left as quietly as she came, and the door exhaled shut. Sometimes your heart can shatter twice in different directions, and somehow still remain one object in your chest. I didn't sleep. Not because of fear, because the world had shifted under my feet, and I was trying to learn the new angles. Morning came like a slow apology. I took the jar from the pantry and opened the note. "Grandma, this is $140. It's what I can give back. I know it doesn't fix anything. I didn't know about the card until last night. I'm sorry. R." I put the money back in the jar and the note in my pocket. I made 2 cups of tea. I put one on the stove to keep warm and waited. At 7:40, a knock like someone remembering how to knock. When I opened the door, Ruby stood with her hood up and her hands bare. She looked like Carl at 8 when he'd broken the neighbor's window and waited to be told who he was. She didn't speak. I stepped aside. She came in and went straight to the table like she used to when she was little and had something to confess. We sat with our hands around our cups. "I saw you," I said. She flinched. I thought it didn't work. I smiled without showing teeth. They always think that. "I didn't know about the card," she said again, and this time the sentence held everything it could hold. Shame that didn't belong to her, and an apology that did. I heard them talking in the kitchen, their kitchen. Not yours, about how you wouldn't notice because you forget and how the bank sends too much mail anyway. I went upstairs and felt sick. I took what I could from my own savings. It's not enough. And I know it doesn't undo what they did. What he did, I said gently. Words matter. Make them point the right direction. Her eyes filled, but she didn't let them spill. I'm sorry, and I know sorry isn't enough. She looked at me the way a person looks at shore when they've been treading water too long. Can I still come here? Not for cake, I said. For truth. She nodded. I can bring both. We sat a long time with the old kettle making its small noises, and the kitchen clock being honest about every minute. She told me about a teacher who loved poems, and a friend whose laugh sounded like silverware, about the way the house felt since everything started to be normal in that thick way that isn't normal at all. I did not tell her about what would be revoked and what would be stored in boxes no one would open without papers and permission. I did not show her the list with names crossed out. Children, even the ones who are nearly women, don't need the weight of your legal language. When she left, she pressed her cheek to mine like a promise. I'll come back, she said. Just me, no announcements. I watched her walk down the path, the same path where she once learned to ride a bike and scraped both knees and asked if scars could be pretty. I decided I would not look at the pantry feed that night. I would not live like a lookout. I kept my appointment with Lena. We signed the revocation of power of attorney. We drafted a trust that made the house a waiting object, its future written in sentences that held no room for interpretation. This can go to a shelter, I said. The one on Greenway. They kept me once long ago when I didn't have a key to anywhere. Lena looked up, not surprised, not pitying. We'll make that happen, she said. Who do you want as backup executor if the professional retires? Someone who can read, I said dryly, and who won't look past me while talking to me. She smiled without softness. I know exactly the type. It is Six did. I changed my locks. I changed my passwords. I changed the rhythm of my days in the way you move a couch 2 inches and realize you can breathe better. And all the while, I did not speak a word about cameras. The first call from Carl came that evening. Mom, did you change the locks? I tried to stop by. I listened to him say he tried to stop by the way weather tries to be mild. Yes, I said. I changed them. He waited for me to add something, an apology for making his life less convenient. I didn't. Jody said she picked up a card that was sent to our house and she was going to bring it by, but you weren't answering. Return it to the bank, I said. They sent another, in person. To me, a pause. You know, it's not safe for you to be handling all this alone. You get confused. Remember when, I remember everything. The sentence surprised even me with its steel. He exhaled annoyance rubbed against fear. We just want to help, then stop. I hung up gently, like a person who knows how to end a conversation that has nowhere left to go. He arrived in person 2 days later. He stood on my porch like a boy sent to fetch a belt. Can we talk? He asked through the screen. We are, I said, not opening the locked door. He rubbed the back of his neck. Jody didn't mean to. She didn't. This is a big misunderstanding. Misunderstandings don't know where the drawer with my cards is, I said. Misunderstandings don't whisper that forgetting is easier. His face changed in increments I had once known. Embarrassment, anger, calculation. You're being unfair. Unfairness, I said, is a habit with a key. It macroed. He stared past me into my hallway where the mirror hangs that has watched me become this version of myself. He looked like he wanted to ask about money, about houses, about documents he imagined belonged to him. I waited. He didn't. He walked back to the car in that same slouched way and drove away with tires that needed air. I stood on the porch long after the sound left. I wasn't triumphant. I wasn't broken. I was a woman on a porch with a hand on the railing and a kettle about to sing. 3 days later, the bank called to confirm the freeze on all online changes. We got a request from an IP address we flagged before. The manager's voice was matter of fact. We declined. We just wanted to confirm you're still good with the current settings. I am, I said. Good with them, good with myself. That afternoon, I stopped by the shelter on Greenway. The same caretaker who once handed me a blanket now ran the front desk with a spine like a string straightened on a violin. I asked for the director. When she came, I placed a check on the counter. Not the house money, that would come later, a piece of the present, for women who need shoes, I said simply. The director pressed her hand to the paper, then to her heart, then to mine without touching it. We'll make sure it becomes what you mean, she said. I left with the brochure and the sense that my porch light was now a lighthouse for something more than my own ship. In the weeks between, small life continued to be faithful. Kay's cat took up residence beneath my porch and learned to accept bits of chicken without making eye contact. I went to the market on Wednesdays because Doris sells eggs then, and if you arrive late, the good ones are gone. I read a book with sentences I underlined because they felt like someone else inside me had written them from another room. I answered Ruby's texts that said things like poem and math is stupid and can I bring paint over? I said yes to all the honest ones. I did not tell her about the camera. I did not tell anyone. The camera was my quiet little door. If I said it out loud, it would become a courtroom. I prefer kitchens. Still, sometimes late, I would open the app and look, the way you look at the sky knowing you can't predict weather, but also knowing the habit of looking is its own protection. Mostly, I saw nothing shadow, cat, the sway of the shopping bag when the furnace kicked. Once, I saw Carl's shadow in the frame of the glass, pause, then leave when the lock refused him. Another time, in the silver hush of early morning, I saw something that made me set the tablet down and go stand at the back door with my hand on the knob. Jody again, not sneaking, not whispering. She stood outside the door with her coat unbuttoned and her hands empty. She didn't try the lock. She didn't talk to anyone. She looked into her reflection in the glass at herself and, I suppose, at the kind of woman she had become without meaning to. Then she knocked once, lightly, like someone about to change a story. I didn't open the door. It wasn't punishment. It was choreography. Some dances require a pause. She left a card in my mailbox that said simply, "Can we talk?" I didn't respond right away. When I did, it was with a note of my own on the back of a recipe. Lemon tart, sharp and sweet. Not yet, I wrote, when talking is not a trick. Lena called the following week. Everything's filed, she said. Your trust is active. The power of attorney is revoked. The house is yours entirely while you breathe, and then not theirs. Questions? Only the ones that live in the places paper doesn't reach, I said. But that's my work. She laughed softly. You do it well. Sometimes I got tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind that sits at the bottom of your lungs and makes sighs feel heavy. On those days, I made toast and ate it on the porch, counting the leaves in the maple tree like coins, and remembering that not every measure is money. I wrote in the old notebook with the bent spiral sentences that weren't angry, exactly, but refused to apologize for existing. I wrote things like, you can be kind and still lock your door. And I won't be the emergency exit in a house I'm not allowed to enter. And a camera may watch, but I will see. Ruby brought over a painting she shouldn't have had time to make. It was of my kitchen loosely, lovingly wrong in all the ways that make art truer than photographs. The light above the sink a halo, the kettle a little bit alive, the chair crooked, my silhouette at the counter, with my head bowed as if in prayer or concentration. Is it okay? She asked, suddenly small again. It looks like home, I said, and she stood taller. The first time I told someone out loud, someone who wasn't paper or a girl with paint, was over tea with 3 women who know how to carry truth without turning it into gossip. We meet once a month and pretend it's for cards, but it's really for weather. I said, they came through my back door, and set the sentence down like a hot pan. No one lunged to pick it up. they let it cool. Nora, who lost a son to opioids and keeps his baseball cap on a hook in her hallway because grief is practical like that, nodded and said, "Mine took my jewelry and left me a pair of neon earrings in the box like I wouldn't notice." Marcia, who says what other people only think, snorted, "You're better than me. I would have put the video on the side of the library at noon." We laughed, which was its own medicine. Ida wanted to know the paperwork involved. I showed her the folder with my name on it and the clean lines of the trust that would outlive me without forgetting me. "You're writing your own ending," Nora said. "I'm writing my own middle," I corrected. "I have no interest in endings." Jody arrived one afternoon later with a bouquet that looked like remorse, hired a wedding planner. I didn't open the door fully. I stood in the gap and watched her rearrange her face into sincerity. "Mabel," she said, "I'm sorry." She said it in the way people say it when a word must carry years. "For what?" I asked. "If apologies are going to be honest, they have to name their subject." She faltered. "For the misunderstanding with the card." "A misunderstanding would have put it back," I said. "For," she took a breath like someone about to dive, "for convincing myself that what was yours belonged to all of us. Because you were old, and because I was busy, and because there was always a reason to tell myself a better story. For using the word help when I meant control. For letting convenience become a kind of theft." The flowers trembled a little in her hand, not from emotion, from fatigue. Apologies are heavy if you carry them correctly. I opened the door wider, but not all the way. "I won't let you in," I said. "Not yet." "I know," she said, and set the flowers on the step like a child leaving an offering for a fairy that may or may not be real. I only wanted to say it out loud. "You did," I said. "Now do it without me in the room." She nodded, and for the first time since she took my son's name, I saw the girl she had been sharp, scared, determined, taught the wrong lessons. She left. The flowers stayed. I gave them to Kay because forgiveness is not a table arrangement. Carl called that night again. He didn't say sorry. He asked if I would still be listing him as beneficiary after all this drama. Drama is a word people use when they don't want to say harm. "No," I said. "Mom," he said, and in that one syllable were all the arguments he planned to make. Loyalty, blood, time served. You can't just cut your family out. Family is a verb, I said. "You've chosen another tense," he swore quietly. "We were just trying to make things easier." "For whom?" I asked. Silence. "I'll see you when you can answer that question honestly," I said, and set the phone down like a person who has learned how to leave a room without slamming a door. The camera stayed. It watched empty shelves and the sway of the broom and, once, Ruby leaving a note that simply said, "I passed my math test, and also, I love you." I left her a reply under the sugar jar. "I love you too. Try the tart. Life is most days this small and this holy." On a Tuesday, draped in ordinary, I went to the credit union, to the post office for the P.O. box key, to the doctor to hand over my medical directives in person. I returned in time to meet a man with a truck who took the old recliner someone else can fall asleep in. I ate soup by the sink because the light is best there, and looked out at the yard where Frank once tried to build a birdhouse without measuring anything. It came out crooked. Birds loved it. I made a list of what would leave the house with me if I ever decided to move. The kettle, the painting, the photo of Frank with his hand in a sack of seed like he was blessing it, the journal. The small dish Ruby made in kindergarten that has held paper clips, rings, and certain heavy words. I know what you want to ask, although no one ever asks it out loud. Did I use the video? Did I burn the world with it? No, I kept it, not as a weapon. As a mirror, in case anyone forgot the shape of their face. Some truths shouldn't be shared. Not because they're shameful, because they do their best work in silence. I wrote the date on a page and the words "I saw what I saw." That was enough. One evening, weeks after the first midnight, The feed blinked and showed me what I had been waiting for without admitting it. Carl stood on the stoop with his hands empty and his face unarranged. He didn't try the lock. He didn't call. He just stood there and then sat on the step like a boy outside a principal's office. He stayed 10 minutes. I know because I looked later at the timestamp. I didn't open the door. I watched the kettle, and when it sang, I poured the water and made tea for one. Some parts of repair don't need an audience. Word traveled the way word travels in small places, quickly and wrong. People asked Kay if I'd gone off my rocker. People asked Nora if I'd had a stroke. People asked Marcia if she knew whether Carl had fallen from grace or just tripped. Women who have learned to keep confidences also learn how to change the subject without anyone noticing. The quiet held. I moved through my days with a steadiness I hadn't felt since Frank was still the kind of alive that spilled coffee down his shirt. I slept more, not longer, better. Then the thing I hadn't planned for happened. Ruby arrived not with paint, not with a note, but with a problem sized, like a girl who knows her house is almost safe and also not. "Is there room in your pantry?" she asked, a smile tucked behind her fear. Mom found letters in my desk. Nothing bad, just mine, and told me she'd start reading my texts to keep me from being influenced by... She didn't say me. She didn't have to. "It's just a notebook," she said, pulling one from her bag, thin and full. "I want to keep it where eyes don't borrow without asking." I put the notebook on the second shelf between the jar of tomatoes and the sack of flour. "Nothing bad ever happened in a pantry," I said. And she smirked because we both knew that wasn't true, and sometimes pretending is a pact. She came more often after that. Sometimes she studied. Sometimes she cried a little without needing to be fixed. Sometimes she said nothing and watched me make soup like it was television. Once, she brought me a broken bracelet and asked if I could make it whole. I tied the ends with thread and tucked a knot under a bead. "It'll show," I warned. "Good," she said. Things should. The day the trust papers arrived, stamped and solemn, I did what I've always done after hard work that looks like paperwork. I took a walk, not far. Just far enough to feel my feet confirm that the world continues to exist. I passed the house with the purple door, where once a woman screamed at a man and then, later, they planted tulips together. Lives are messy. They are also cycles. I waved at the mailman, who knows which letters weigh more than others. I stopped at the corner store where the boy with the tired hands calls me ma'am without making it sound like a category. When I got home, there was a letter in my mailbox with my name on it in Carl's handwriting that has gotten worse over the years, like his patience. I carried it inside like it was heavy. I opened it with the dull knife I use for everything. It was not confetti. It was not an apology I could fold and keep. It was 3 sentences that said, "I don't understand. I was only trying to help. Can we reset?" Reset is another word for erase. I put the letter in the fireproof box with the trust and closed the lid. That night, I dreamed of the pantry, not the camera, the room itself. I dreamed I stood inside it and all the shelves were full, not with food, with words. The good ones and the ones people use as wrenches. I took down the ones that didn't belong to me anymore and put up others that did. Dignity. No. Later. Come. Leave. Enough. I woke smiling and made toast. On the first truly warm day of spring, I opened the windows wide and let the house breathe. Air moved through it like a procession, touching photos and chairs and those parts of the floor that remember children. I sat by the window with my tea and watched the maple leaf itself into green. The camera was off. My doors were locked. My heart was neither. The world was exactly as safe as it had ever been, which is to say, not very. But I had my own weather now. That counts. Jody came once more, not with flowers this time, and not with the performance of repentance, but with Ruby. They stood at the step like uncertain girls. Jody spoke first. "I won't ask you to forgive me," she said. That's not a thing to ask for. I will say I spoke to someone who doesn't share my last name and told the truth to her and to myself. I will say I returned what I could and made an appointment to return the rest with a judge in the room if that's what it takes. I will say I understand the locks. And I will say I am trying to understand the camera I never knew was watching, because I think maybe I should have been watching myself. She swallowed carefully. I will not bring those roses again. They felt like lies. Ruby looked at me with her hands in her sleeves. Her eyes asked if I could let a woman into my kitchen without letting her into my pantry. I opened the door a small amount and let them stand on the mat where the grit gathers and where we all have to decide what we are willing to shake off. We drank water because tea felt like too much grace. We didn't say the kinds of sentences people say in movies. We said the smaller ones. Thank you. I didn't know. I do now. It's hard. It's harder not to. You can come on Tuesdays. Not every Tuesday. Some. After they left, I went to the pantry not to check the camera, but to put my hand on the shelf where the notebooks live. They were safe. Not forever safe. Just today safe. That is the only scale that works. You want to know what the camera saw after that? Nothing. Or rather, everything ordinary. A raccoon's tail like a question mark in July. My own hand reaching for sugar. Ruby's notebook becoming thicker with words that tell the truth about a girl whose loyalty chose itself. The back door opening for air and closing against certain kinds of weather. The way the light changes in November, so your kitchen is both kinder and less forgiving. Some nights, out of habit, I still check the feed. Most nights I didn't. I told Lena I was thinking of selling someday, moving to a place where everything is ground level and the neighbors are nearer at hand. She nodded and said we could draft addenda. Paper is good at future. I began putting aside money, not for them, for me, and for the shelter still. I started going to a poetry group at the library where we read lines too young and too old for us and still found ourselves in them. I gave Kay a second key, because trust should look like action. On the anniversary of Frank's death, I made lemon tart and ate it standing up, because he always hated when I did and laughed every time. I wrote in my notebook, I didn't become unkind. I became a lock that finally fit the door it hung on. The camera remains. The app icon lives on the second page of the tablet where I don't have to see it unless I'm choosing to. That's the difference, I think, between living and being lived. Choice, even small ones. Especially small ones. If you are reading this because you wonder whether to keep watching or to turn away, I don't have an answer for you. I only have this. Late one night, in the gray square of a pantry on a screen, I saw the part of my life that was a lie, and the part that wanted to be true. I chose the truth. It was boring in the way soups are good and locks that don't rattle are a comfort and paperwork is a quilt. It saved me without applause. Weeks turned into the kind of season that makes the maple disrobe in slow choreography. Ruby came on Tuesdays most of the time and brought different parts of herself each visit. The loud, the stubborn, the almost ready to leave. She asked if she could paint the inside of the pantry door. Just a little, she said, an orange. We stood in front of the blank wood like it was a canvas someone else would accuse us of celebrating too much. Go ahead, I said. She painted an orange and beneath it wrote in tiny letters, "This door tells the truth." The paint dried with a skin so thin, I had to bend close to see the words at all. That felt right. Not every truth needs to yell. That winter, there was a storm. The kind that makes radio announcers earn their salaries. The power went out for 5 hours. The camera, no surprise, died with the rest of it. I lit candles and ate cheese that shouldn't have been that good. In the quiet, I heard the house speak in the voice of wood remembering the tree. It said, "Locks keep out cold as well as wolves." It said, "People become who they practice being." It said, "Keep the kettle, keep the girl, keep your name." When the lights came back, the pantry blinked awake on the screen. I looked and saw nothing. A broom, an orange, a shelf where notebooks live beside jars. I closed the app and went to bed. Months later, I can say months now, because time is a real thing again. Jody came alone in a coat that fit and with hair that didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. She didn't knock. She stood and breathed and left. I found a small envelope on the mat with a receipt inside and a note saying, "It's not all of it, but it's the start, and the rest is on a schedule that belongs to the court and to you." There was a line beneath, not a sentence. A line that looked like someone practicing how to write. Carl doesn't come. He calls sometimes and leaves messages that sound like a man trying to convince himself that history is a set of facts that can be reorganized with willpower. I delete them like I sort mail. Charity, bills, lies. He'll find me if he wants to tell the truth. Or he won't. I keep the chair by the window for people who knock with clean hands. The camera, though a last confession, caught something I did not expect to be given. One evening, when the house smelled like cinnamon and something almost like forgiveness, I saw an image on the gray screen that looked like a mistake. It was me, my own reflection in the glass of the back door, the pantry light off, just the kitchen glow behind me. I was standing with my hand near the knob, not touching it, just close. I was smiling, not widely, not in performative joy, just the kind of small smile that belongs to women who have finally placed the last necessary document in the right envelope and made tea while the world kept shouting outside. I looked older on the screen than in my head. I looked like someone who had been loved once and betrayed more than once, and who had chosen not to let betrayal be the largest word in her dictionary. I looked like a woman who still believed in soup. I turned off the tablet and, for the first time since the midnight, I put it in a drawer. I didn't hide it. I made room for it next to the blunt pencils and the birthday candles and the rubber bands that have outlasted birthdays. I went to the pantry and stood inside. The orange looked back at me from the door. I touched it with 2 fingers and said, not loudly, "Thank you." The pantry, being a pantry, said nothing, but the house shifted its weight, as if finding the place in the mattress where sleep comes easiest. In the morning, Ruby knocked and I opened. We stood in the kitchen with the window making halos out of dust. "I dreamed you were young," she said, eyes bright. "I am," I said, "today, at least." We ate toast, we spilled jam, we laughed. On the way out, she touched the pantry door without looking at it. Like people touch relics without believing. Exactly, just in case. Later, I walked to the shelter with another envelope smaller than before, still heavy enough to sit in a palm. The director took it with a yes that sounded like a door opening. On my way home, I passed the bank. The manager waved. I waved back. 2 women who know that boring saved a life. Sometimes I still imagine saying it out loud to Carl about the camera and the card, and the way the pantry taught me how to be unafraid of grainy truths. But then I think about kitchens and courts, and I choose kitchens. Maybe one day he will sit on the step again and not be embarrassed to ask if there is a chair for him. Maybe there won't be. The story doesn't need that knot tied to be a good blanket. If you were waiting for me to say I forgave them, I will disappoint you. Forgiveness is not a prize you hand out like flyers. It is a coat you put on when the weather asks for it. Some days I wear it. Some days I carry it because one of us may get cold. Most days I keep it on the hook and go about my small life with my keys in my pocket and my name intact. I never told them the old camera still worked. I didn't need to. It wasn't about catching anyone. It was about catching myself before I fell into the habit of disappearing. When I checked the feed at midnight that first time and saw what I saw, I thought I would become smaller. I became something else, not larger, right-sized. The pantry is quiet now. The camera blinks its little tiny red heartbeat. The back door sticks sometimes in humidity and then gives like it remembers how. On the shelf beside the notebooks is a jar of buttons I'll never use, and a recipe card for lemon tart, and the painted orange on the inside of the door that no one but us will ever notice. Sometimes, I put my hand on the shelf and feel, physically, the weight of a life that is mine. It is heavier than it looks, and I can carry it.